Welcome to the Joypunk Podcast. I'm your host, Jenelle Etzel. Today's guest, Rosemary Brensen, has turned her success and experience into being one of Portland's most sought-after business coaches and speakers. She helps creative entrepreneurs regain balance and joy while helping them discover how they can become the bosses they were born to be in their lives and their companies. Thanks for joining me today, Rosemary.
Thanks for having me. This is so fun.
It's really fun to be sitting across from you today, especially when I think of how we met. So back in, what was that, 8 years ago? 9 years ago, maybe? There was something called the Curiosity Club. And it was curated speakers and thinkers that they were bringing in. And Rosemary and her business partner at the time, both of them own Portland Garment Factory, came and gave a talk about starting their business. And I immediately was really taken with the two of them. And I clearly saw right away that Rosemary was a person that was getting the shit done. Like, you told this story about needing to source material and, finding any resource that you could. And I was like, okay, this lady is resourceful. It was just so interesting to me. And I went home and I wrote you kind of a fan letter.
That's right.
Yeah. Like, I hope that you'll be my friend. And then I ran into you in town a couple more times. And then wada bang.
It's so true.
I know. We became business partners at a point, and we've coached together and we worked together, and you are a great friend. And it's just so fun to know you can, very Portland story. You go see someone, write them a letter, and there you are.
The rest is herstory.
Herstory.
Yeah, I loved that letter. We opened this mail like, oh, and you were so rad because we started our businesses in 2008, both in that scary kind of unknown time. And it was like, here's to successful businesses that came out of 2008.
Yeah.
And I never forgot that letter.
Oh, that's awesome. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about that company and about your, and I actually don't know, was that your introduction to being an entrepreneur, or was that just one of the many along the way?
Yeah, I've always had the hilarious little businesses in high school and all sorts of things, but that was my first real big one. And I moved here from San Francisco. I went to design school. I worked for a designer there where we did all of our manufacturing in San Francisco. So when I came to Portland, I was like looking for that here. And everyone's like, oh no, there's no such thing. There's no such thing. And I was like, really? But then I heard someone started this thing called Portland Garment Factory. And when I went, it was like literally the size of this podcast studio. And it was Britt nursing her baby, sewing. And I was like, oh, which I think back to her calling it Portland Garment Factory being such a badass like claim in the power play, because it did not feel like a factory back then. Yeah. And then similar to kind of our story, one thing led to another. I was like, I worked for a designer in San Francisco. I do cutting. I do all this stuff. Like, I can help you. And then we became business partners quickly. We hardly knew each other. And then our business just skyrocketed.
So the Portland Garment Factory, it seemed like, it's so wild because that's such the genesis story of Living Room 2 is like one woman nursing a baby in a small room.
Yes.
It's very, very familiar. But you all really took it to become a very well-known and respected Portland brand. It felt like you guys were on a rocket ship. Can you talk a little bit about that trajectory of growth and how many years? And
over the 8 years, I crunched the numbers, as I love to do, after I left. And after 8 years, we had 28x'd. And that was just, no wonder it felt like so unsustainable for me as a person, because it was just nuts. And we didn't have any outside funding. We just bootstrapped the entire thing ourselves. And it was a wild growth curve.
That is wild. You think about that, like your business doubling and doubling and doubling and doubling. And oftentimes, we're in, like, entrepreneurs have this mindset where they're just looking ahead and they're not even seeing the incredible growth that is behind them.
Yeah.
And I'm always trying to get our agents here, and we do this together in Boss Up, is like, let's look back and look at how far your business has come, because that's the best roadmap we have to what the trajectory is going forward.
Yeah.
And are you ready? Are you building systems for your business to 28x again? You know, the exponential growth, or is it a time, like I'm telling a lot of people right now, you know, it's in bulk. It's like, it's time to go back and prune, and maybe just rampant growth isn't always the solution.
Right. No wonder you're so tired when you look at how much you've grown. Yes, totally.
Another metric I love talking about is that when you grow more than 20%, you know, most business thinkers and leaders will say the wheels fall off the bus. More than 20% growth in a year, like all the systems that you had don't work anymore. So I can't imagine what it was like with 28 times recreating the business every single time to be able to keep up with that kind of growth and support the organization that you grew.
Yeah, it was wild. And so now I help creative entrepreneurs who are, you know, on a rapid trajectory keep themselves from burning out and, you know, build sustainable systems and, you know, frameworks so that they can have work-life balance and have kids and be barefoot in the grass and do all the things that they want to be doing and not just work themselves to the bone.
Is that where I imagine most people come to you when they're like, help, I built this amazing thing that's literally taken over my entire life. Yeah,
they're just like, it's great. I have a 12-person waiting list every single day, and I hate my life. And you know, it's so unfortunate that we let ourselves get to that point, because there's so many things we can do to right that ship. And just with the client that just said that to me, you know, we spent 3 months together, and now she's like, oh, that's better. I love my life. This is amazing. In 3 months, it doesn't take long.
Yeah. People forget that they're becoming the boss that they wish they had.
Yes.
So be the boss you wish you had.
Right.
Not the one that makes you work round the clock all the time with insane expectations.
Yeah. Can you imagine working for that person?
No.
Yeah.
You'd quit.
Yes.
So before you quit, call Rosemary.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a very darling business, and still is too, in Portland, because it was, not only were you two women that were running this really interesting factory, but you were kind of it seemed like you were the go-to and the epicenter for a lot of makers to go and actually be able to put their visions and have them executed.
Yeah.
Actually see them come to fruition. But you two also had your own own designer line as well, that you guys were designing and fabricating as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And that was always my dream after coming out of design school, to have that be possible. And, you know, that was one of the biggest challenges of that business, is trying to run both of those. They're so different. They're such different animals, being a manufacturer versus being a designer. And all of those, you know, the things that those businesses take to thrive are pretty much opposites. So having to do both of those things was wild.
I am wondering, do you see, having gone through building a business, scaling it, one of the most interesting business problems that you had to was managing a staff where English was a second language, or maybe not even quite proficient yet all the way in English. I just think of how hard it is to manage staff, and then you put that layer of complexity over the top of it. And there were so many interesting challenges in that business. But I'm wondering, you coach now so many entrepreneurs, and you are inside their businesses. What do you see the most common mistake or pain point there is for the entrepreneurs you're coaching?
I think it's suffering alone, suffering in a silo, thinking that you're the only person who's ever had this problem, or you don't have anyone to turn to talk to. And I remember when I finally reached out to you after the fan mail, I was telling you how I was feeling that way. And then you told me about Entrepreneurs Organization. Yeah. And so that was a huge turning point in our business, to not be alone, to have a cohort of people who understand what you're going through, and that you can kind of go to in confidentiality with your biggest problems and your biggest wins. Because I remember, having one night having to lay off my entire staff because of a supply chain problem. And I was there, at 6 or 7 p.m. and I had just laid everyone off and I was alone in my 5,000 square foot factory, just crying.
Yeah.
And then I had to go to I was also the secretary of the business association. So I had to go to that meeting. And I remember my friend was bartending the meeting and he poured me a really big shot of whiskey and was just like, this sucks, man. And I was just then I was drunk and crying at the meeting. And I was just like, what am I doing? This is not sustainable. You can't just suffer alone like that.
Yeah. Building those networks of support. That's something we implemented at Living Room for our agents a long time ago, was the roommates groups. And it's interesting because sometimes agents push back and they're like, this feels a little bit like therapy. And it's like, it's not, no, that's for licensed therapists. But it is really powerful to get into a room with different people that are living your experience and just being able to say the things that are hard.
Yes.
And getting that reflection back of yeah, it's hard for me too. Because sometimes you think it's just you. Yeah. And then you start to get so restricted in your thinking because it's so defeating.
Yeah.
You actually coach agents. You coach a lot of real estate agents. They're entrepreneurs as well. What do you think you see their biggest challenges?
Ooh, right now, specifically, having come out of the crazy pandemic market where they were just raining money, it seemed like, on themselves. Now they're having to go back into what we all do, which is sales, right? Of getting people not only, so we think about it like the fast lane, COVID, everyone was in the fast lane. Everyone wanted their shit done. They were already ready. They were already ready to go. They already maybe even looked at the house they wanted. It was just churn and burn. Yeah. And then we think about getting people out of the slow lane or even off the bench. People who right now have told themselves, I mean, this was me before I bought my house just now. I was like, that's not for us. We can't do that right now because of the story that I had told myself about what we went through last year this time. But the market is so different. So it's how do we get those people off the bench and really posing themselves as an authority and as an expert rather than just your friendly friend who came and brought you cookies on Valentine's Day, but how can you get inside my head and problem solve? You talk about this all the time of tell the stories, tell the stories of how you're getting people from not thinking it was possible to now being in their dream home.
Yeah. I forgot you've just moved. You bought a house. You were so excited and you sold and bought at the time. I felt like most of the market was in its deepest point of insecurity.
Yes.
So how did that come about for you?
Oh my gosh. Well, I follow a lot of my intuition or just the energy that comes my way. And I told Kristen Lincoln, who's amazing, we're just going to find the buyer who wants to buy my house. And she's like, you mean without putting it on the market? I'm like, yes, because then I could get out of having to do a contingency because those were basically totally a no-no last year.
Yeah.
So I saw Kristen's newsletter. And then there was a person who was looking in Milwaukee for a large lot with dogs. And I was like, it's her. She's the one. And so Kristen's so good about just following my every whim. She's like, sure, we'll ask her. And then she was interested. We showed it to her. And I was like, whoa, could this work? Could my vision work?
Yeah.
And then I looked on Zillow. My dream home, which I had already had my eye on, was for sale. And so every step of the way, we were just like, okay, I guess it wasn't supposed to be right now in my mind, but I'm just going to take one step. And Kristen was so good about just being like, you're just taking the one step. We're just going to put an offer in, see what happens. And then it got accepted. And then, we kept doing every little thing. And now we've been in our house for almost a week. And it's so dreamy.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Oh, that's amazing. You're speaking to, agents being in that fast lane and now they've got to get people off the bench, come and join us. Things are still moving. What's your advice? How do you find clients? Because you are in the same position that most of these agents are. It's a service-based business,
yes.
Really word of mouth, referral. So, and you've built a tremendous business. What have you done and what do you think would work for brokers as well?
Yeah. My business is very similar to, I think, a lot of the realtors' businesses is that it's referral based. And that's hard you don't feel like you're in control of the faucet. I like to think of it like a faucet. And when I just passively let people come to me, it feels like I don't have any control over that dial. Yeah. But then, when I go up way, way, way upstream from those referrals, I do remember, I did actually just went to happy hour with that person. Or, I remember that those touches, and you talk about this so well of about going back to your top sources and nurturing those people. I just threw this big dinner party and everyone posted about it on Instagram, and then everyone was saying, how did you get invited to that party? I wanted to come to that party. And then that next week I had 5 new client inquiries. So it's just do the things you love with the people who are already supporting you. And it's so easy. It's not Instagram ads or all this stuff that we get sold about how it takes to run a business. It's actually way more about relationship building, love, friendship, all the things that they're probably already doing, but just turning the dial on those things.
I love too that you point out it's doing the things that you love, because you'll feel energized, and then people around you will feel energized, and that attracts your people. Totally. And I see people really struggle with, I have to do this. And it's like, well, do you love that? Do you even have an interest in that? Yeah. Because it won't be sustainable. It has to be in the flow. Yeah.
Like a lot of the realtors do pop buys. But if that fills them with fear and anxiety to have to go knock on someone's door, then the person's going to open the door and see this freaked out person who doesn't want you to answer the door. That's not going to be the best thing. But if you love that, do that.
I love asking people this, how do you set yourself up for the rest of the day?
As a new mom, this is a very loaded question for me because I used to love my morning routine. I did tarot, meditation, journaling. I had this whole thing. It was so beautiful. I got to have my coffee alone. And then I had babies. And then I had another baby. And so now I just try to be flexible. And I don't get to have a morning routine. And sometimes that makes me really mad. But I think it's such a good example of having to shift the energy. To this morning, I had a horrible morning. Both of my kids were crying and it was so freezing, and to get in the car. And I was that was a horrible way to start the day. But the challenge there is then when I'm ready to shift the energy, do I know how? It might not be, entrepreneurship is never what you think it's going to be. You can have this perfect plan and it won't be that way. So then what? Can you be resilient? Can you bounce back? Do you know how to shift the energy when that happens?
I think that's a great metaphor too, just for the markets that we're in. And you can do all the planning, but a lot of times we have to swim in the stream, whatever those rapids look like at that time, and to be really flexible and to go with it. And a great point too that you make about it's really, when you're not going to have the morning routine, that you can rely on what can you do, what skills can you build to help you shift energy quickly. You work with clients where you may be listening to someone that's losing their life savings, closing a business, and then, the next place, they're winning, it's going great. And then, you're shifting gears constantly between clients. I'm wondering what you do to kind of transition, or do you have any?
Yes.
Yeah. Any tips there?
I think even though we love to talk about strategy and the how and financial modeling and all the things, I think having energetic hygiene and an energetic toolbox is the top thing that people need. And to be successful, because you have to fire someone, and then you have to immediately go into a sales meeting where you are on top of the world. So how do you do that? And so and you're right, I have to do that a lot. So I use really loud music, dancing, moving my body, getting outside, putting the sun on my face, breathing. All of those things really help me. Also, I say things like I bring my energy back to myself, cleansing and clearing it as it enters my system, sending all of my clients' energy with love back into them, cleansing and clearing it as it enters them, and kind of do a little energetic hygiene so I don't take that on.
I remember before I would go into listing appointments, you're running here and here and here, and then I would park. I always try to get there a little bit early, and I would sneak my book. That was like my quiet time to like relax, maybe read a few pages in my book. I love to be early. But when it couldn't be early, it was just telling myself, I'm coming here with a heart of service. Because then I turn my salesperson off.
Yes.
And the conversation is just so much easier. It's like, how can I serve you? And it also is interesting when you approach clients like that, because you're not selling them. And for myself, it's helped me draw better boundaries for myself. Because if I'm meeting with this person, I'm consulting. I'm trying to figure out, am I the right person? And sometimes I'm not.
Yeah.
So knowing when, I can definitely help you. I think I'm the right person for this. Or, I'm hearing you, and the best way to serve you is probably for me to move aside and let you work with someone else. When I worked as the principal broker at Living Room years and years ago, people would come to me and be like, I think I want a partner. And I'm like, ooh. And I always try to talk people out of it. I'm like, I don't think you want a partner. Maybe you want an assistant. Because a partnership to me is so much more complex, and it takes a lot of communication, a lot of boundaries, and oftentimes it takes a certain level of maturity in ourselves and our business and our confidence that we can really be a great partner to someone else. I often try to encourage people to start with an assistant, but people think it's going to be easier to have a partner. Then I don't have to be a boss.
Yes.
I can just be.
What are they avoiding?
Nico, what are you avoiding? But you have had some really successful partnerships. And what would you say to someone that's like considering bringing on a partner in a business or in their real estate practice? And what were the things that you did with your partner at PFG to keep things, to keep your visions aligned?
Yeah. It is a hard thing because, then you have two potentially opposing or, different visions of how things should be going. I think, having different skill sets is helpful so that you can kind of stay autonomous. Dividing and conquering is a huge, it's a trust point. And it's a big challenge for people to let go of the things that they don't want to do. So finding someone that has, complementary skills, having very clearly defined roles, who does what and how and when, and what happens when that's not happening. That's the hardest part. Because partnership, it becomes so much like friendship, life partnership. It's hard. You care so much about that person, even when it's super clear. So how can you manage when that, when those lines get blurry, I think is a big challenge. And I wish I would have found the clone of myself back then, because I think one of the biggest challenges of my partnership was not having a neutral person that we could all go to and talk things through. Because when you sit at the table, you're still my perspective and your perspective, just talking again about the same things again that we talked about last quarter or last year. And so you bring your role, you bring who you serve kind of in terms of the business. If one of you is more in sales and one of you is more in finance, that's a big opposition. So how can we have those conversations? And I love being that now, as that neutral person who comes in and helps facilitate these conversations, because they are hard. And it is hard. It's really important to get all the voices in the room in an equal way and not have the same person running the conversations all the time.
I think one of the things that people on first glance or first meet with you might not know that I really respect and love about you is that you love the numbers. Because, for those of you who can't see Rosemary, but she's always wearing like beautiful flowing colors of the rainbow and this huge smile and hugs and energetically. And you're very intuitive. And, I think we tend to put people in this box, but your secret power is really being able to look at numbers and get information and help people look at their numbers and understand what they're saying.
Yes.
And we oftentimes don't think like the finance wizard and the intuitive, person are in that same body. But how did you learn to be so comfortable with the numbers? Did you have training, or is it just something that, a system, or how did you develop that skill?
Yeah, I've always felt really, and I really relate to my clients on this. I've felt paralyzed by the numbers in my former business. And I, would get myself into trouble because I'd never wanted to look at them. I would just be like, these freak me out. I don't know what these mean. This is just all too much. And, having older, very experienced tech, industry accountants try to not be okay with how uncomfortable I was and not know how to get me out of my paralysis around it, but just keep talking at their fast speed about, whatever is happening. And I would just be like staring at it like a deer in the headlights, And I think when we got into kind of a challenging situation and I had to dive in and was literally like, this is the only way out is for me to understand this. And I just sat there, forced myself to do it. I always had to have myself like a really good hot drink and like the right music in my headphones. And I just plowed through it and fixed a bunch of stuff. And, we called it the gauntlet because it was like, this was the only way our business was going to survive is if I could write this thing that had happened. And that was so empowering actually to look back and remember that I did that. And I took my power back from everyone who had ever told me I was bad at math, and then I realized, this is so simple, actually. Like, we're all freaked out because we have no idea how to do this. But really, it's so much more intuitive than it looks.
Yeah, it's a pattern, right?
Yeah.
And you're like an expert pattern maker.
And it's like sleuthing it out. It's like, ooh, what is that? That's cool. What if we put that here? How would that affect the bottom line? Or what if we spent this instead? How would that change things? Or, oh, wow, if we just crank the dial a little bit on this, look what it does to the bottom line. Like and so now I really relate. So many of my clients have that paralysis with the numbers. And I think being both is so important because I can energetically feel that they're starting to feel that way. And I could be like, you've got this. You've got this. This is we're going to do great things with these numbers. Look what it's showing us. Like literally, I had this person paralyzed with this decision and I crunched the numbers for her and it meant she was going to make $50,000 more this year. And then she's like, wow, really? And it's like, yeah, the numbers don't lie. That's the beauty of them. They're just going to tell you the facts. There's no feelings around them. That's what's beautiful about the both. You can have the numbers and the feelings.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me, I went and taught a course on using the one-page plan for the EO Accelerator members. And I put up, and at the time, Living Room was at a total of $2 million revenue. And I was using the one-page plan. There's a lot of financial metrics on there. And as I went through, I was like, this is how I use it. And I just want to empower everybody. You don't need to know what every single bucket is. It's just you have a general understanding, and then you'll add to it. You'll learn, and each time you revisit this, you'll learn one more thing. Like this number I pointed to, BS. I don't know what the BS number is. And I remember someone in the audience just laughing, going, balance sheet. Oh. And it's like, well, there you go. You can run a really successful business and not know that. But if you know, like the simple metrics and you know how to run a great business, like I feel like I just hope everyone gets empowered that like the numbers can be really fun.
Yes.
And I love to meet with my team and be like, I'm feeling this way. And then you look at the numbers and you get validated. It's like, well, whew. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was that. Or vice versa.
Right.
Being like, oh, okay. It's just it's just a feeling, or this is just seasonal.
Yes. Or I might have listened to NPR on the way here. Yeah. That's why I feel like shit.
Exactly. What do you think people should consider before running their own business? Like if you could be there at the genesis of the idea, what would you tell folks?
Oh yeah, that's such a good question. I think it takes a real scrappy rebellion and almost like a don't give a fuck what people think and that I could do anything kind of mindset. I run into the challenge when my clients are like, well, I'm not good at that. I'm not going to do that. Or I don't think I should try that. Or, having limits on what they think is possible for themselves. I think it's almost like a naivete about, oh, I could probably do that. I could probably do that. I mean, how hard could it be? Like,
IT looks easy.
Looks like all you have to do is set up a printer. I think I could probably figure that out. But really, that's why at the end of my time at PGF, I would get all the machine parts for a sewing machine on a pallet, and I would put them all together myself, the motor, everything. I would be down there, and then I would 10 minutes later have a meeting with Nike, and I would have to like take my coveralls off and go do that, and then like sit down and do payroll, and like you just have to do it all. So are you willing to do that? Are you like, I think I could fucking do that? That's exactly the mentality you need.
I feel like now that I've started a business, and whenever I talk to someone who wants to start a business, I'm like, oh, are you sure? Are you sure?
Totally.
Because you know, and then it's like, and then to give the blessing and be like, call me, because you will have these dark moments, and I will root you on.
And I think the opposite of what I just said is also true of like, know when to call in your team.
Yeah.
Or like build a team. If you are struggling with this or that, like, you know, you say this all the time. If you keep having the same how problem, it's not a how problem, it's a who problem.
Yeah.
Get someone on your team who can do that.
I wrote in our last newsletter about the family summit that you came in and moderated for my husband Zippy and the kids. And I got so much good feedback about that. And people are like, oh, I want to reach out to Rosemary and ask her to help me set some goals.
Wow.
And I loved the exercise that you did with us about inviting what we wanted to invite to our party.
Yeah.
Where did you, like, how did that evolve? And can you tell people if they want to do something like this with their family, how do you talk about the party that you want to have as a family?
Yes, I love that one. I'm the queen of analogies. So this one just came out of probably facilitating and using funny analogies. But we so often feel like life just happens to us, and that just the same things just keep happening they just walk in the door and we're like, oh, you again, you know. But we don't often feel like empowered to be like, oh, actually, you're not invited to this party. I'm building my own thing. And you know what I'm inviting? Ease, abundance, all the things, you know, that you want. And that reframe, for some reason, just really clicks. Because when you do think about, for the people listening, the exercise is you're having a party. It's the best party you can ever dream of. And you just fold a piece of paper in half, and on the left side, you write what's invited to your party. Everyone gets to brainstorm about the things they love and the things they want to bring. And the right side, you say what's not invited. And everyone gets to put that on there. And it's such a neutral way to say things you might want to say directly to someone, but you could just say that's not invited to our party. And that's a really neutral way of saying it.
I love that. And we had in our family, we were inviting cats and disco balls and uninviting sarcasm and Taylor Swift digs. Like,
yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Rosemary, for joining me today.
This was so fun. Thank you.
Anytime I have a party, I want you to be there. I always want to invite Rosemary. And how can our folks that are listening find you if they want to reach out and learn more?
Yeah, departmentofcommunity.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at Department of Community.
Thanks, Rosemary.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Rosemary Brensen. To learn more, make sure to check her out at thedepartmentofcommunity.com or on Instagram at the Department of Community. Join me next time, where I will be speaking with the web television show host, public speaker, and crowdfunding whiz, Lindsay Murphy, or Crazy Aunt Lindsay, as she's known on her show, The Fab Lab. Lindsay joins me to talk about leaving her life in New York City to travel across the country to the unknown city of Portland, Oregon, with only 47 cents in her bank account and faith as her only guide. I never miss a chance to hear from this woman, and neither should you. To leave me a note or hear past episodes of the show, make your way to joypunkpodcast.com. You can also leave us a review on the Apple Podcast app. Enjoy and gratitude, Jenelle.